a song for ya.
You're listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I will do one episode for each song the band recorded in the studio. However, this is a fan podcast and not band endorsed. It's more of a tribute to their long history, well beyond just the hits, and my way of giving something back to a band that has given so much to me. Let's dig in! Hello and welcome to another episode of Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin. Happy Monday, guys. We are in it, season 5. Everything changes. We go from the world of psychedelic rock to the classical stage of the Royal Albert Hall to Deep Purple and rock. And we're starting off with a killer episode. I've got a pot of coffee freshly brewed, ready to take on not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 versions of Speed King. That's pretty crazy. Now, they aren't all studio releases, obviously, but a couple of them are really interesting because they're in the works versions. And we get to see a little bit behind the scenes of how the band put things together. There's some interesting differences between them, so I think they're worth discussing here on the show. I won't do too critical a look on them, but I think they'll be interesting to include. So before we get to Speed King, though, I want to thank my patrons. Both William Rose and Corey Morissette. Thank you guys so much for your support. That really means a lot to me. You guys are really awesome. And of course, I've known William for quite some time, and I've known Corey for quite a while as well. We've done a ton of podcasts together on pretty much every show that we could connect on. I was very excited to be his first guest for the revamped show, The Power of Positive Geeking, talking about different films and in a really unique way. And I really enjoyed that. He was on the Haskincast podcast. We were talking about Glenn Ross. Then I went on his show talking about Big Trouble in Little China. We did the Backtracks Aerosmith podcast together. He started that with his friend John, and then I came in for a bit. And that was a lot of fun. He's been on Haskincast. I've also been on his show, and the podcast Will Rock, which is a tour of the Van Halen catalog, which they have now surpassed, he and his co-host Mark Kmeyer, and they're now doing solo albums by people in and related to the band. Really cool. And then, of course, I am the season finale host of every season of the Ultimate Catalog Clash that Corey does with our good friend Kevin Brown, who I have also exchanged many a podcast with, whether it be on his Tom Petty project or he on the Haskincast podcast. Corey was our first guest here on the Deep Purple Smoke on the Water podcast, covering the song Hush. And that was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to having him back on with other songs he's selected. But for now, guys, we are going to get into Deep Purple in rock. I can't imagine, and you know, I said this before with Hallelujah, but I really can't imagine thinking about, you know, it's 1970, there's a new Deep Purple album out. Awesome. I like Deep Purple. I'm going to check it out. Whoa. What a cover. It is Deep Purple on a 5-person version of Mount Rushmore, which is weird because they're a British band, but hey, you know, a concept is a concept. It's in rock. I get it. Strange that they didn't do something with maybe Stonehenge or something like that. Ian would connect with that later, though, in Black Sabbath, Ian Gillan, of course. But opening up the gatefold, you see a picture of the band. You get a little snippet about each song. For Speed King, our little snippet, and this would be it's the first song on the album, so our snippet is Just a Few Roots Replanted, which means absolutely nothing to everyone except whoever the hell knows what that means. Obviously, we have a big transition in the band. Rod Evans and Nick Simper are no longer in the band. Ian Gillan and Roger Glover come in to take their place. Interestingly, though, not just as musicians, as a songwriting team that they had been in episode 6. So I'm sure it was nice of them for them to come into a band where they at least had some familiarity with someone. They had their buddy coming in with them, so there was a bit of a connection. But there's a danger with that because it potentially then can form, you know, deeply cut interrelationships within the band. Like you guys are the new guys. but they're also friends. So they have a little bit of power together instead of being an individual person coming into the band. But then you've got the three people that formed the band on the other side. So it can be a bit polarizing, but that doesn't seem to be the case at this point at all. There was some issues between Ian and management, but that's beside the point. What we're really here to talk about is the sound. Now, I have to say, I love the sound of this album. It's so raw and heavy, and even just listening to the very beginning, because Ian Gillan's voice sounds just really thick and full and rich and deep. And then you've got a heavily distorted Ritchie Blackmore, you've got a heavily distorted John Lorgan's Hammond, and you've got a really distorted, heavy Roger Glover bass guitar. Then we've got a good bass drum sound on here to round things out. Nice, strong, poppy snare. I mean, this is just excellent from beginning to end. I could say, thinking ahead, I don't think I have a single issue with the mix on this album. But who knows what I might discover as I'm giving a critical listen for the first time going through this album. So I may have a little bit of a different perspective. I may hear things I haven't noticed before in the many hundreds of times I have heard Deep Purple and rock, but I'm excited to get into it. I have 2 copies of this on vinyl. Both are Warner Brothers issues from US, and one is the green Warner Brothers, and then one is the Warner Brothers view down the street, or what they call the, I don't think it's called the white label. I can't think off the top of my head what it is. It might be the Terre Haute pressing. I'll have to look. But in any case, both are great versions. The covers got a little bit of wear on them, but the records have a lot of that nice poppy, scratchy sound going in, and then just amazing sound hitting the beginning of Speed King. Now, I mentioned earlier there are 4 versions of Speed King. The first one that we're going to listen to is the standard album version, I believe, if you were in anywhere but the US. Because the copies that I have just start with basically they're about to, Ian's about to start singing. There's really no drama or anything. It's just boom, we're in. This version, though, that I have comes from the 25th anniversary edition of In Rock, and it does have the extended intro. So I'm going to play that for you and then stop it, and then we'll start it right where the other standard US issued album starts. And here is Speed King. What an explosive introduction. Now imagine the last album track we heard from this band before the concerto was April. Then the single that was released was Hallelujah. A little bit of a rocker, but, a little bit more gentle ballad, really. We get this is the next thing after the concerto. So really explosive. I would have to think that the reaction was very either hell yeah or what the hell is this, pretty much. Now, I don't know how the song was recorded, so I don't know if this intro was tacked on later, if it was recorded in order where they did all of this and then just went into the regular song. It could have been spliced together if it had been recorded separately. Certainly, that long chord from John would make it very easy to sync up to another track if the rest was recorded separately. But that's the intro that that everyone else got. Now, what we got here in America starts with the snare drum. I don't know if you noticed it in the last section, but the organ just building up a little bit in intensity and volume, just slightly, enough to make you feel like something was about to happen. Nothing so grandiose where you're like, hey, look at that organ swell. So that was very well done. Then here, starting with that snare drum, that's where the versions that I have start. And man, does this song just take off from there. Waste no time, gets right into it. Ian Paice on fire. Just the bottom end on this song, that distorted low push you're getting from the music is absolutely incredible. The organ and bass combination here is fantastic, along with Ritchie. I do have a little bit of insight into this one. This was a song that I referred to quite a bit on Uriah Heep the Magician's podcast, along with Fire by Jimi Hendrix. Let Me Stand Next to Your Fire, because this was written with the same structure. It's like a little bit of music, and then that lays back for the vocals. Then the music comes in, then the vocals come in. And it's just like this little, not quite a question and response, but it does almost feel that way. But it's really nice. And I remember Roger was in an interview, he said, I remember thinking, wouldn't it be great if we had something like that where we had the vocals cutting in between the music, and then started putting this song together. And it's a really great way to keep a focus on the vocals where it needs to be, and then let the musicians shine in between. No one's really fighting for real estate here. Everything seems to be very comfortable and the way it should be. Nobody's trying to sneak anything in. It's all very natural. But the connective tissue here, as we're hearing, just getting into the second verse, is once again Ian Paice just coming up with a little bit of flourish. And like the vocals, everyone else kind of backs off just a little bit to give him room to perform that transition for us. And I really like that. Everybody's going to get their shot in this song. And so it's nice to have these little pieces where they're like, hey, you take this one. All right, sure. And then we'll go to the next one. Very, very well done. But the power of the vocals, this really harsh rock that we're getting from these guys, this is not April. This is not the Concerto. This is not Hallelujah. This is Deep Purple Mark II. Now, I would imagine that a lot of people probably thought this was a drug song. It's not. It's just about, to me anyway, just getting caught up in the music and the power and the speed and the heaviness and all of that. The lyrics certainly support that hypothesis, but I would imagine a lot of people did initially think it was a drug song, just because I'm sure speed was very popular around this time of late 60s, early 70s. But before I go any further in the song, I forgot to mention this up front, so I want to make sure I do it now. There's a recent interview with Ian Paice. I don't remember who did it, but it was about an hour long, really good. It was the guy who actually sang in a show that night with Ian Paice. I guess their singer wasn't able to make it, so he jumped in and did some tunes, did some interesting lyrical interpretations of some of the songs. But one of the things that they talked about, they kind of went through the history of Deep Purple to a point, and they talked about this transition from Mark I into Mark II. And Ian's current story was that, if I understood this right, was that Nick Simper wasn't happy with the state of music. And when Roger came along for the session with Ian Gillan to record um, Hallelujah, oh my God, what happened to my brain for a second? They said, I guess Ian said to Richie, he goes, why don't we snap up the bass player as well? So I don't really know if they were intending, but it seems like they would have been intending, because they told him not to show up for the session. Maybe they were like, let's just see what this guy can do. He's bringing a bass player. He'll do the session. That's fine. I'm not really clear on that. Again, really don't care that much about the aesthetics. But just because that is a little bit of a bone of contention in the history of Deep Purple, whether Nick wanted to continue with the band and they felt he couldn't play it, or they felt he didn't want to. So this kind of leads more to we felt he just might not have the right attitude or mentality going forward. So maybe more he didn't want to. And that might have been why they felt that way. I don't know. It was interesting, though, to hear that perspective, because it's a little bit different than what I've heard before. Of course, we're talking 50 years later, recollections and all that. But there it is. Let's get back to Speed King. We've now been through 2 verses and choruses. I love that, just that See Me Fly, the way Ian sings that and holds the note on fly. I really love the drama of that. Richie said when they were writing this album, if it's not dramatic, it doesn't belong. And I think certainly right off the bat, we're getting that. This is a very dramatic song, very heavy coming in. The band is obviously on fire, very excited about what they're performing here. And it's like the whole world is just opening up. And, it feels right to me. And maybe that's because I know the history. I know where they go from here. But coming from where they were, some of the harder stuff that they were doing on the concerto, which was really a lot of what they were doing on stage in their shows. They were a nice psychedelic rock band on record, but live they were a band on fire. And so this is a very, very natural progression for them to head into. You've got Led Zeppelin, you've got Black Sabbath, you've got the Beatles having done Helter Skelter. I mean, rock and roll is a thing, and hard rock is the new thing. It's the new phase of it. And they certainly were ready to jump on and do their part. But this just feels like such a natural transition, especially getting, Ian, who can sing really hard, Roger, who knows how to play rock bass. It just all fits together so well for me. I just have to stop it really quick, because one thing I want to point out of how much I love about that last few seconds that we just heard is that Roger really cuts through, because he's not being doubled by John or Richie or anybody at this point. It's just him playing that riff, and you hear how heavy the bass really is. I mean, that is amazing, absolutely amazing. Because I remember when the Deep Purple podcast did their isolated tracks on the song Burn, I was really amazed at how heavy Glenn Hughes's bass sounded on that, because it doesn't really come through so much on the album version. It's very much blended into the song, and you lose some of those individual sound qualities when you blend with other sounds. Of course, I mean, that's just how sound works. Just like you would lose certain aspects of individual colors when you start looking at colors together. So that's fine. That makes perfect sense. But to lose that much of the heavy edge of the bass, because you really don't get the distortion end when you listen to the song. And maybe I'll feel about it differently when I get to Burn. So this is just me going from memory. But I remember being just absolutely surprised of how heavy Glenn really sounded. Here, we're getting how heavy Roger's sounding. And if we're losing some of his grit in the dynamics of this, I shudder to think how heavy it really was. Sweet baby Jesus. That is just amazing. What a killer trade off between John and Richie. We've heard these guys trade off before, but nothing like this. Nothing with this ferocity, with this aggression, with this heavy sound. Absolutely just amazing interchange. But there's something else going on that I would encourage you to rewind that section and listen to again. Listen to Ian Pace. I am pretty sure all that hi-hat work that you're hearing, he's playing with his foot, because we're hearing some faint dynamics on the toms. He's doing some rolls there in between the rim shot. So he's going from rim shot to tom, back to the rim shot on the snare. And I'm pretty sure that he's keeping time on the hi-hat with his foot. Really cool stuff, though. I mean, it's the typical very dynamic playing Ian Pace that we've got from Mark I, coming in with just a heavier edge. He seems to be just, not that he was lacking any energy in Mark I, but he seems to just come back with a new revitalized appetite for playing creatively and really not just playing the backbeat, just really making a mark on his own, but at the same time giving room to let John and Richie shine and let them do their thing. Roger holding up the low end and the rhythm very solidly. I mean, it does not get better than this. And what's really interesting, as I'm saying all these very positive things about this song, is that this is not one of my favorite Deep Purple songs. Like right now, as I'm hearing it, yeah, I am totally loving this, but I suffered a bit of overkill from this song because I used to listen to it all the time. It used to be one of those songs that if I needed to get pumped up, if I needed to just be like, all right, you got to get up and start your day, or you got to quit, being lazy. You got, no pun intended. You've got to, you just got to get motivated and do things. This would be one of those songs that I would put on and I would get all fired up. And so I used to do that so much that I kind of burnt myself out on the song a little bit. And I really haven't listened to it that much in years. So coming back to it, I feel a little bit refreshed. I'm loving every bit of it again. I have never, up to this point, I should say, I mean, obviously going forward is a different story, but up to this point, within the confines of the Deep Purple catalog, I have never heard Ian Pace hit his snare like this. Even in some of the more aggressive songs like Listen, Learn, and Read On, it has a whole different sound to it. It's beefier. I don't know if he got a different kit or just maybe was playing on a different snare, but this sounds beefier. It sounds like it's being hit much harder. It sounds like he's using a bigger stick too, to be honest, something thicker. I've seen some video though from this tour, and I can tell you even up through Machine Head, watching him live, I think the Denmark in 72, I think is the one I'm thinking of. His sticks look like little twigs. I mean, they look so thin and brittle. I don't know how they stood up to his playing when it came to Deep Purple Mark II. But he's really belting this thing, and it's coming through. He's back to playing hi-hat by hand because you can't get that kind of sound playing on foot. But man, just so much energy. And these riffs, what's really interesting about the riffs of this song are not difficult. They're not incredibly intricate. They're just well-written, solidly played, beautifully harmonized riffs. Oh man, the power. Imagine being, 1970 and hearing this for the first time and going, what the hell happened to songs like Shield and Chasing Shadows? And this is a whole new band now, a whole new band. I love this build. I don't think I've quite equated it to this before, but the way they structured this, kind of revving up and then going a little bit back and revving up again, kind of reminded me of like a motorcycle. Switching gears, you hear it rev up, then the gear switches, and then it revs up again. Kind of reminded me of that, which is interesting because I don't think I've had that comparison quite before. but beautifully done. Incredible build, probably one of the greatest, heaviest builds that I can think of in a song. And then, with Ian on top of that, just with his powerful voice and almost hysterical cackle at the end of that, just absolutely powerful. I don't think there's anything they could have done to make this more heavy or more intense or more powerful. I think they nailed 100% of what this piece could do. I mean, it's got all the grit. It's got just enough harmony in it to make it interesting and keep it fresh, but it's also not melodic in that harmony either. And I mean, yes, you could argue, well, they could have added this, they could have added that. But when you're recording this heavy and you've got this much distortion coming from three different instruments, you got a heavy snare, a good punchy drum beat, and then, a heavy vocal on top of that. Although I think the vocal is a little bit low in the mix, but that would be the closest I could come to a criticism on the song. But the more you add, then it starts to get muddy and you start to lose dynamics, and you have to really start working with panning and spacing things out in the sound field. And that can kill the power of what you have. Sometimes adding things can be a very bad thing. And I think, honestly, where they pushed this song to be is exactly where it should have been. You gotta love a good Ian Gillan laugh in a song. I mean, you just have to. I think that's one of my favorite things about the Black Sabbath Born Again album, is that we get a little bit more of that from Ian. It wasn't something he did a lot, but man, when he did it, it had a point. Yeah, there it is, guys. Speed King, the original album version. Now, what's interesting too about that is that we get a little kick drum at the end of that from Ian. And I think it was Hallelujah, I want to say, where there was a kick drum at the end, but it killed the music. Like right at the end of that, the music just stopped. There was no more ringing out, no more anything else. And we get that here, but the ringing continues on. Which is kind of fascinating, a little bit different take on it. Ian was not the final word on this one, but man, I love the way that just the distortion, the little bit of feedback there carries out just so beautifully. I don't know how anybody could listen to this song and not just be like, oh my God, I want to take on the world right now. Because it certainly just gets you all pumped up, and that's why I used to use it for that purpose. I did double check, in the In Rock that I have, the green label is, I think I might have this backward on my sheet, because I think the white label is the Terre Haute pressing. But yeah, that's where the white label comes from. They are both US pressings. I was right about that, which is why they both start out with just from the snare drum on and do not have that really dramatic intro. I don't remember where it was that I first heard that longer extended intro. It must have been on a best of, maybe, because I know I heard it long before the 25th anniversary edition that Roger remix came out. I know I heard it well before that, but I can't remember where it was. So it must have been on a collection or something like that. I'll have to go through and see if I can figure out which one it was. But in any case, absolutely just, oh my God, amazing, unbelievable. the intensity of that song, the power, the drive, the beefiness of it. I mean, the only criticisms, like I said, I could make, I guess, would be a little bit more Ian Gillan in the mix. They do have a little bit of reverb on him that kind of sets him inside. It's almost like the guitar, bass, and organ are like the edges of the walls, and the drums and vocals are contained inside of that. Could have been a little bit more kick drum just to make it a little bit more, punchy. But apart from that, yeah, absolutely fantastic mix on this whole album. And I mean, I'm not saying the way they mix it is wrong. I'm saying if I were to suggest any changes, those would be the changes. I'm very happy with what I hear. So no criticism there, just options really. And as an audio engineer, I can say 10 different people can mix that song to the point where a record company would be happy releasing it, and you would get 10 different mixes. That's just the way it is. So we're now going to move on to another version. This also comes from the 25th anniversary of the In Rock album, and this is the Speed King piano version. But don't think it's not heavy just because it's a piano. I mean, obviously, this is where the song was in development still, so we're not quite to the final version, but we're getting very close. Interesting thing to point out, though, is that there's a couple of things. Obviously, since this was not destined to be released, although I think Roger had mixed this for the 25th anniversary edition, he didn't just take it right off the tape. I mean, he actually probably mixed it for that. It's a different mix. We don't have the final process that we would have on the original if it had been recorded this way as a final track for the album. We also have a completely different dynamic without that organ in there. The piano sounds like it's doubling Richie and Roger, and that's fine. But without that organ, without that heavy distorted organ, it changes the level of grit. It changes the intensity. One simple decision can change so much in a song, you guys. Honestly, one effect decision, one tone setting idea, anything, like all of that affects the dynamics of the song. And obviously we're lacking, I mean, it still sounds heavy, it still sounds good, don't get me wrong, but we're really lacking that full-bodied push that we got on the final studio version that we just listened to, because the organ is now a piano. It's also a little bit slower than what we hear on the final version. So it's like, I think they knew that they were probably just recording a demo version of it and not recording it for the final album at this point. So they're still playing around with ideas a little bit. So this is still in development. But obviously at some point they said, we just need to increase the tempo a little bit. And I think we're there. And I think they made the right decision, because this is good, but it's not the album version. That was kind of a neat little thing with See Me Fly. I like the way that they did that. And then obviously instead of that, huge drum fill that we get the little piano transitioner here. Again, sounds fine. If I hadn't heard the studio version, I probably would say, hey, this is a pretty good rock and roll tune. But definitely just lacks that drive and intensity. Still good though. It makes sense for bands to record demos of their stuff so that they can work on their own parts individually, maybe figure out, okay, who's going to take the solo here? How are we going to do this transition? Here's what we have, but is this what we want to go with? Do we want to change it to a different player? Do we want to write something else over top of it? Do we want to change it? It's really hard to just write and be able to analyze the music if you're only performing it all the time. So, you're in the studio. Hey, let's lay this down. We'll all kind of go our separate ways for a half an hour and we'll come back with ideas. However they want to do it is fine. It's really tough to develop a song when you're inside of it the entire time. So this is a very good way about doing things. And we get a fun version out of it. One of the things I love most about this version is hearing Ian sing along to Richie. I think this was, I don't know what they were doing on stage at this point, but obviously they hadn't written Strange Kind of Woman yet, which would be Ian and Richie's on-stage vocal duel during live shows. So I kind of feel like this was a precursor to that, kind of like where maybe the idea was born for them to do that. But this just sounds lovely. Obviously, it wouldn't have worked as well in the studio, final version because Ian's got to get ready to just go off. And if you're doing this, it's adding melodics to the song. It's, I think, kind of taking away the edge of it when you go with a heavier version. So I'm glad they didn't do this in the final, but I love that we get to hear it here. And this is one of the things I love about listening to demos and, in development takes and things like that, because we get to hear these different things that the band tried that we don't get in the regular song. And it gives us an appreciation for the final song, because we get to see some of the things they went through to get there. Yeah, see how different that build feels with the piano versus the organ. We're missing that rich fullness in the song because a piano just is not going to bring that. If you're a classical pianist who's playing a lot of dynamics, it can sound full, but honestly, like in a rock band setting, you're just not going to get that out of a piano. You won't. You can double it with another instrument like an organ that might thicken it up a little bit, but you're really not getting a full body compared to a guitar, a heavy bass, and a drum set. What I do love in that section is Roger's playing. Roger's playing some really cool stuff there. Ian Pace, absolutely on fire. So they're putting a lot into this version. They're, when you're recording a demo, when you're writing, you play full on all the time, right? And you do that, especially when you're a rock band. You've got to, if you're going to use this as a, foundation for where you're going to take the song, you've got to be able to feel what you're going to bring in that song. So if you're just like, oh, let's just do, we'll just record a quick lazy version of it, that is not going to work. You're not going to be able to develop that song properly. You got to hear what you're building on. And even though the tempo is slightly slower, I think they're doing a great job of delivering what this song would eventually become. Obviously, there were some lyrical changes as well, but we're very close to the final here. I really think that this is a great version. And again, had the album version not been released and this is what opened the album, I would have been perfectly happy with it. Yeah, again, I always love a good Ian Gillan cackle. But listen to what they're playing here because they're changing the octave every other time. So they're going da 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 da. I really like that. They're just not playing the same thing over and over, and it's so easy in rock music, and you hear this all the time. And this is, I think, one of the reasons that I don't like bands like Motley Crue or really not a big fan of Kiss or Poison or bands like that because yeah, I feel like most of the time they're copy paste. They're like, okay, we wrote a riff for the verse, we wrote a riff for the chorus, we wrote a riff for the transition, and when those parts come up, we'll repeat those. Um, I don't often feel like they put that much into the musical side of things. And, I just think that those bands are playing very simplistically, and that's fine. That's what they do. That's their wheelhouse. For me, I want something that's going to be more interesting to listen to. I want something that's going to be a little different on every pass. I don't mind, the basics staying the same, but if you want to really make your song stand out, you have to put different bits of excitement on it, different colors, different spices in different areas. And I think they really do that here. And just even this little change up of just, okay, we're going to play it straight. Then we're going to play this second half of this riff an octave up. Then we'll go back to straight. Then again, the second half an octave up. It just makes it so much more interesting than just da 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 da. It breaks up because that gets really monotonous after a while, especially in a song that 5.5 minutes long on the studio version. This one's a 4.25. You're not going to want to keep listening back. You're not going to want to go to the end of the album and then come back to this because I heard this riff a bunch of times. It's going to wear on you very quickly. When the dynamics change, when it's more interesting and you get used to it, but there's always something different going on, you could listen to that song a lot more before it starts to get that fatigue on you. I have to wonder if the introduction of the organ here is maybe what was the inspiration for them to go, you know what, we should ditch the piano and play the organ the whole way through it. I think that would sound much better. I don't know whose idea that was. I don't know who made the suggestion or whatever, but in any case, we know where we ended up. Excellently done. Great ending, very explosive. I love those runs of the pick down the fretboard from Ritchie. Lots of energy for me and pace. Just killer version. Although, like I said, nowhere near as powerful as the final, but a great song on its own. I did look, and I was right on my sheet. Actually, the green pressing I have from Warner Brothers is the Terre Haute version. The Burbank version. Burbank was the name I was trying to think of with the street and trees on it. That does not have any identifiers other than that as to where it came from. But yes, I did have it correct on the sheet. The green was the Terre Haute. Now they are both original US, as I mentioned, and double check that is correct. So we're going to go back a further step in the development of this song, and this was previous to the one that we just heard. This version was titled "Kneel and Pray." I know what you were thinking. You're like, wait a minute, this is "And the Address." No, it wasn't. It was, it's "Kneel and Pray." It sounds like maybe a BBC session that was recorded live. I don't know. It's hard to say, but definitely has a different feel to it. Completely different lyrics, obviously. The song structure is coming together. So we're kind of, peeling back the onion a layer at a time and seeing more of the origins of the song and the development so that we can then appreciate the final studio version. But this is really interesting. Now, buckle up, guys, because it's 9 minutes and 19 seconds long. So we're going to be listening to this for a bit. Let's see how it goes. Now, obviously, this is a more rough recording than what we've been listening to. I can't remember where this came from, to be honest. Don't know where I acquired it from. It was some time ago. This is not from the 25th anniversary edition of In Rock. But what's interesting is that if this was recorded live, I mean, why would you go out and perform a song that you don't have lyrics to, that's still in development? So I don't know how far they thought this was along. But here's another thing to consider. They write Highway Star, the basics of Highway Star, on a tour bus to kind of just like be sarcastic to a reporter, and they put it in the show that night. Now, granted, it was not the final version that we would hear on the album, but I mean, that's kind of the thing that they would do. So it's not really unheard of that they would say, hey, we've got this song we're working on, let's play it for you. But to do that on the BBC, kind of gutsy.
Turn around, tell me what you found. Oh, yeah. I wanna feel so good inside you. Yeah. I can't hear you. I can't see you. I need you. You gotta kneel down and turn around. Oh, tell me what you found. Come on.
I mean, from a historical standpoint, this is pretty fascinating to listen to because it's definitely a similar but not the same song. And you see the foundations of what would become Speed King in here, but this is kind of a cool live jam at the same time. Like just listening to it for what it is by itself. If I were to be at the show and see this being performed, like I'd be pretty happy and be really enjoying this. I mean, this is a great mix if you're a fan of Ian Gillan and Ian Pace. If you are a fan of Richie, John, or Roger, you may not be very happy right now listening to what we have, which is why I'm kind of like, I don't know if this was like BBC broadcasts were typically better sounding than this. So I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. Don't really care. All that I care about is enjoying this piece of music as it is. And aside from the mix, like the energy's there, the band's on fire. I wish I could hear more of what everyone else was doing to really get the full scope. But for a song in development, this is pretty damn cool. I think it's safe to say that somebody pinned Richie back to a part of the sound field that we could hear. It was like almost too much. Like, it's like, okay, you turned Richie over to us. Great. We can hear him. Okay. That's enough. That's enough. Interesting. Very interesting. I would love to have the master tracks to this and really dig into it. But there's another dynamic that's completely different from the song too. And I can't remember if they did it in the last version or not, but that refined trade-off that we get, you know, the sort of just back and forth between John and Richie. This is just, from what I can tell, been all Richie, and John's been supporting him. So this definitely feels more like one of those drawn out songs on stage where they would play it for, 15, 20 minutes. John would take, 7 minutes. Richie would take 7 or 8 minutes, whatever. Feels like that more than anything else. Then I'm glad that they changed that and did really the just, back and forth that they have in the final studio version. This is great live, but studio wise, I like that it's probably about the only controlled thing about the song. So I don't know if this is because it was more of a live jam or what, but we're certainly getting a different song structure. It could be that the song structure that we're comfortable with or know very well, hasn't been written yet, or this is just how they're dragging it out in a live setting. I'm really not sure because I don't know the origins of this, but either way, it's a lot of fun to listen to. That might be really cool if we had a better mix of it. It is so rough and raw. It's really hard to tell, but that was a very extended build up into the final verse, or what may not be the final verse. I don't know yet. Obviously, with these bonus tracks, I'm not very familiar with them. I've heard it, but it's been a long time. I probably listened to it once and went, "Wow, that was different," and just never listened to it again. Nothing against it by any means, but I'm a comfort food kind of guy for some reason when it comes to music. I like hearing new things, but it's really hard for some reason for me to integrate even things I should be comfortable with. Like, this version should be something that I can easily go, okay, I can get to know this. This is pretty cool. Maybe it was the mix I didn't like. I don't know. But in any case, yeah, very different, really long instrumental solos. But I have to say, again, I really like the choices in the final studio version better. Another thing that I'm noticing is typically the first two verses are very short riffs, da-da, da-da, with that space in between. And then when you get to the third one, they hold the chord. They're not doing that here. They're playing it muted all the way through all four lines in the verse, which is interesting. It, for me anyway, and I can only speak for myself, but it lacks that power that we get by holding the chord. And again, it's one of those things that it changes the dynamic. It makes it more interesting to listen to. When they do the short part, that longer part's coming up. You're like, okay, this is cool. We're going to get this and we're going to get that, and a little bit of variety. Here you're getting the same thing four times. It's not as interesting to listen to. It's not as dynamic. And, I'm not saying it's right or wrong because it's just a different choice, but just pointing out the differences between the two. Very interesting. Really glad, again, that they decided to go for that change in the later versions. Okay, interesting to know that octave change had been in there from earlier versions. Seems like a natural part of their style of writing, but yeah, that's interesting that was there, and that maintained through the different versions of the songs, at least from this version on.
Kneel and pray. Thank you. Hello. Hello. We're Deep Purple. It's nice to be here. How you doing, man? Nice and... Smells good. We're gonna do a thing which we wrote now. It's called Child in Time. It's a very sad story.
Well, whoever cut these for the digital versions, it's very bizarre the way that was done. And maybe that's how it was recorded for a vinyl release or what, I don't know. Because, like I said, I don't know where it came from. But it seems to me like if I was doing a live album and I was putting out tracks, I would probably cut it the opposite way. I would put the introduction to the song and then the song, not the song and then the introduction to the next song that's not attached to the file. Call me crazy, which may or may not be relevant to that statement, but that's definitely not how I would go about it. I'm more of a I guess a bit of an archivist and a little bit more of an organizer when it comes to that kind of thing. I'd rather have everything together that belongs together. When in one of these days, I'll have to go back and recut all of the Rockline shows that I saved from Purple, but it's because it was just taped off of the radio because that's where it broadcast, and then just converted to CD based on how I had taped it, and just like found little punch points to cut it up where commercials and stuff were, but didn't really like go in and clean it all up. So I'll have to do that at some point. But this is it's a fascinating look at the progression of the song. I think it's a really energetic and highly passionate version. Obviously, now we see at the end that this indeed was live. We're glad that it smelled good in the room. Thanks, Ian, for letting us know. But it explains the energy, and it explains kind of just the tempo of the song, the wackiness of the song. But had the structure been set where they would have had that John Lord, Ritchie Blackmore trade-off, I would think that they would have done that live even at this point. So obviously that was not part of the structure yet. Song's still in development. I think it's really ballsy that they played it live, to be honest, because I feel like they didn't have final lyrics even for what they've got. Those don't seem like, even if they changed them later, those don't seem like lyrics that, okay, I've written the lyrics, I think we're good. Okay, we can go ahead and perform it. I feel like they were just kind of like feeling the song out live. You know, they had certain parts planned out, the builds, the where we're going to return after the solos, that sort of thing. But obviously the song underwent some producing notes somehow and turned into the final version. So we have one more version to listen to. This one is nowhere near as long as that. Again, do not know how I got it. Do not know where it came from. This version is called Ricochet. It comes before the Kneel and Pray version. So we're just kind of stepping back one more layer of the onion. It's as far as we have available, at least as far as I'm aware of. But should be interesting. I have not heard this in a long time, so I don't know the quality. I don't know what's in it, but we're going to check it out together. Here it is, Ricochet.
And the things you had. Don't run, no, don't run. Oh, baby, have some fun. Good loving is meant for two. A bit for me and a bit for you. Oh, please, oh, let me free. Stop my misery. Yeah. All right. Oh, baby, pray. Oh, baby, this is what I say. Right.
Obviously, this is the Ian Gillan in your face mix. So far, the lyrics seem pretty similar to Kneel and Pray. So this is just, again, kind of a chronology of where they were. And yeah, so they did have some kind of structure before they played it live, which is interesting. I feel like, because I guess it's so far from the final version that it's really a work in development, but and they definitely had a structure at this point. Glad they changed the lyrics, though.
I did wrong. Let me sing my simple song. You were good. I was bad. I wanted the things you had. Don't run. Don't run. Oh, baby, have some fun. Oh, please, please, please. Stop my misery. Yeah. All right. Oh. Yeah. Cool. Oh, kneel and pray. This is what I say now.
Very interesting. Again, they haven't found that long chord holding spot during the verse. And the choruses seem to be going to the octave a lot faster. This last one, it was all three of them, I think. And then the one before it was the first and third. So pretty interesting. Again, how, like at some point, things aren't really set in stone until they're recorded. And even then you can change them live or in, different versions of the songs if you release it later on. But it's certainly interesting to think that, there were very conscious thoughts about how the song should be done. They had a structure, they didn't settle for it. And that's what I like. They thought, okay, this is something that we have that has value and benefit and we think will work, but we're not quite happy with the way it is. So we're going to work on it some more. They didn't just say, okay, that's that song. Let's, what do you got next? And I feel like, and I used to do this, so I'm not calling anyone out. I certainly did it myself, but I feel like you get really comfortable with how a creation is. Right. You've got like, okay, here's my verse, here's my chorus. I like that. You play it enough, you get really comfortable with it. It gets fun to play. And you're like, I'm just going to do this because this is what makes me feel good. And you don't step out of it and go, you know what, though? It could be better if. I think that tends to happen a lot. And I think that's the big difference between a band like Purple or Zeppelin or Uriah Heep and some of the other bands where I was, again, making that comparison to bands like Kiss or Motley Crue, where they're like, dude, that's our riff. Dude, that's our chorus. And that's it. Like, they don't think beyond that. They work just enough to have something, but don't bother to reach the potential of what it could be. Wow, that was very different with Richie playing the volume knob on that a little bit. We'll get to hear more of that later when we get to Fireball. But yeah, really, really different feel to it at all. It really doesn't have anywhere near the energy. You can have the tempo without the energy. And part of it is the mix. Obviously, you have to have well-mixed music for it to really hit the way it's meant to. But yeah, very different. And now it sounds like they're going back into a riff I wouldn't have expected.
Come on. I like oh, baby, pray. Oh, baby, this is what I say. Make me feel alright. Show me what you found.
I'm only hearing little bits of John Lord and Roger in there. I'm mostly getting Richie, Ian Gillan, and Ian Pace. But what's interesting is the dynamic change of just playing the higher notes during the chorus on repeat instead of going for that, lower, more guttural sound. That the combination of those, I'm really missing that in this version. I'm really glad they changed that. Nothing wrong with this, but it's, again, just not what it could be.
This is what I say. Come on! All right! No more. Whoa! Feel and pray. Yeah, what I say.
Well, they cut those reverb tails off quick, didn't they? Yeah, not bad. One thing that I really love this version, and thinking back now to where we started at the beginning of this podcast with the album version, is it shows how hard this band is willing to work to make something the best they feel it can be or the best it can be at that time. I really admire that. And I don't want to give the impression that I'm picking on bands like Kiss or Motley Crue or anything like that, any other band I've talked about on the show. It's just a matter of a different style of music. I think we need music that goes from very simple to very technical because we have people of all different tastes. For me, this right here is exactly my wheelhouse. The music that has a straightforward seeming performance, but when you really get right down to it, they're intricate songs. There's a lot going on. There's layers. There's a lot of choices. I love seeing that they made certain decisions within this that I've mentioned. And I think we don't get the chance to do this very often. So I really wanted to dig in on this episode and show you that. And I realized, this is a long episode, but I thought that was very important because I had them at my disposal. There's only a couple other times I'm going to be able to, show any kind of demo versions or anything like that. So I don't have much, but I will play what I do have because I think it's of interest to people that are fans of the music to see kind of the humble beginnings of a song to that shining diamond of a final project. Either way, though, this has been really cool. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed this much deeper dive than normal. Hope you enjoy and have a great Monday. Get your week off to a great start. And we'll see you tomorrow for another track, a very interesting track on In Rock on Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast, a tour of the entire Deep Purple studio recordings. Please remember to give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Leave a comment and tell your friends. I also have a Patreon set up if you'd like to support the show. You can also write to me at smokeonthepodcast@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode and thanks for listening.